Good morning, everybody. Good to be back in Israel, and it was wonderful being able to visit with everybody in Deerfield. I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts on this week's Torah portion. So first of all, this week's Torah portion in America is actually different than the Torah portion in Israel. So it's a little bit confusing because we got ahead here in Israel. But this week in America, they're going to be reading Parshas Kedoshim. This is an interesting parsha because it starts off with Hashem saying to Moshe, Moshe, gather the entirety of the Jewish people, gather them all together. I have something I want you to tell them. So Moshe gathers everybody together, and he says, I want you to teach them the mitzvah of Kedusha, the mitzvah of holiness. Now this is fascinating because all the other mitzvot, all the other commandments in the Torah, God said to Moshe, here's the commandment, now go teach Aaron, and Aaron will teach his sons, and eventually that law will be taught to the Jewish people. But in this particular case, with this particular law, the laws of holiness, the law of Kedusha, Hashem said, gather everyone together. They all need to hear this. This is super important, and they need to hear it together. And the question is why? What is it about this mitzvah of Kedusha? What is holiness? So we normally think of holiness as something that the individual takes upon himself. A commitment to live to a higher spiritual standard. A commitment to refrain from inappropriate forms of behavior and indulgences. And that is true. That's absolutely true. That is very much a part of what holiness means. It means not to over-engage in the physical material world, to maintain a spiritual, godly, divine perspective on life, to invest in spiritual endeavors. But there's a very important lesson over here. Holiness in Judaism is not something that happens by the individual, for the individual, in a vacuum. We don't believe that holiness means go sit up on top of the mountain somewhere and meditate on God's oneness. Holiness requires community. Holiness requires interactions with other human beings. The only way to truly reach a level of holiness is by being part of a community, by being involved in the lives of other people, and by seeing other people as opportunities to give, to enrich, to invest, to elevate other people. And that's why this particular mitzvah of holiness is specifically communicated to the entire assembly of the Jewish people, because community and connections to other members of the Jewish community is an essential component of holiness. I can't be holy in a vacuum. I can't sit in my home or on top of some mountain somewhere and assume or think that I'm going to reach any level of holiness. Holiness is only achieved in the way I interact with other members of my community. And that's a very, very important thing. The other thing I wanted to share is that probably one of the most famous, if not the most famous verse in the Torah is in this week's parsha, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor kamocha, as yourself. So what does it mean to love somebody as myself? So the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, once said, you wake up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I'm not perfect. I've made some mistakes. I'm not exactly the person that I want to be. I did this, unkind thing, or I made this particular mistake. But you know what? I'm human. I'm trying. And we cut ourselves slack and we judge ourselves favorably. And we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, and we look for extenuating circumstances. V'ahavta l'reacha, you have to love the other person, kamocha, the same way you love yourself. Look for the positive in them. Look for what's beautiful and special and unique about them. Look for the divine spark within them. And when you think of the negative things, their negative behaviors, or whatever character traits they may be lacking, judge them and look at them kamocha, the way you would look at yourself. Cut them some slack. Look for the positive. Look for extenuating circumstances. Try to see them in a positive light. That's a huge mitzvah in the Torah. Rabbi Akiva says that this is one of the most fundamental principles in all of Torah. So, a couple things for you to think about. And I hope everyone has a beautiful Shabbos. Wishing you all Shabbat Shalom from Yerushalayim.